Understanding and working with colours is one of the biggest challenges many photographers encounter. Mastering how to use colours effectively to adjust the mood or atmosphere, or simply just to pick colours that go well together. It can be sometimes quite challenging. So that's what this video is all about. Understanding colour. And by the end, you'll have the tools and understanding to confidently use colours to shape emotion and craft visually stunning colour schemes. And I'm going to start right now. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. Now, colour theory is an incredibly expansive topic with lots of core concepts to cover. So what I've done is I've broken this video into chapters that you can see here, so you guys can skip to the part that will help you out most. From the anatomy of colour, colour temperature, the psychology of colour, and even colour harmonies. We cover it all within this one video. So first, colour theory and the anatomy of colour. Colour theory is the understanding of how colours are made. All colours in photography and film are a combination of three main primary colours: red, green, and blue. All other colours are a combination or a mixture of these colours combined. So let's take yellow for example. Yellow is a secondary colour, where it has a mixture of 50% green and 50% red. So changing the percentage values of these three primary colours can create millions of colours in the colour spectrum. And that is the basics of how all colours are created. Now, your colour spectrum is defined by your colour space. A colour space is like a box that defines the range of colours that your image can contain. This range is called your colour gamut. Some colour spaces are like small boxes, and others are genuinely massive. So choosing the right one is critical for how your images look on screen as well as in print. Now, if you'd like to know more about how colour spaces impact your photography, I'd recommend watching this video, where I go in depth with the differences between the three most popular colour spaces in photography. You have sRGB, Adobe RGB, and CMYK. So why are colours so important in photography? Colours, when used correctly, can add mood and atmosphere to your photos. They can also guide the viewer's eye to what's most important in the photo. Take this photo for example. The muted tones and colours in the background draw your eyes to the bright orange shirt of the model in the foreground. It brings him to the forefront of your attention. However, when used incorrectly, like this photo of Central Park, it can make the viewer feel lost, nauseous, or even irritated. Colours are really important when you want the viewer to be guided through your photo. If all of the colours are shouting at the viewer, there is nowhere for your viewer's eye to rest. Colours can make or break your photo, and it's really important to get the colours just right for your image. Now, when I was first introduced in photography many years ago at this point, I just thought adding in colours to your photo was the way to go, boosting the saturation and brightening the colours. But when I added in these raw elements and raw colours, I noticed that the colours just came out ugly and it didn't look very good. But why is this? Well, it's all down to your anatomy of colour. Now, the anatomy of colour is essentially what colours are comprised of. And it's comprised of three different things that you can actually control. You've got your hue, saturation, and luminance. Firstly, hue. Now, hue essentially is the actual colour we're working with. Hue refers to a specific colour or shade in the spectrum of light. It defines what we typically think as colour, such as red, blue, green, yellow, etc. These are hues. Changing the hue shifts the colour itself. So for example, altering the hue of blue might change it to more of a teal or a purple colour. Next up, saturation. Now, saturation measures the intensity or purity of that colour. High saturation means the colour is very vivid and very intense, while low saturation results in a more muted or washed out tones, eventually becoming grey at zero saturation. Increasing the saturation can make your colours pop, while decreasing the saturation can aim for a more softer or a more muted look. So for example, on the left is 100% red, and it's very difficult to look at. But if you tone down that saturation to around 20%, it almost becomes pink. I haven't changed the hue, just the saturation, and it can give you completely different results. And the third principle is luminance. Luminance refers to the brightness or lightness of that color. Independent of hue and saturation, high luminance makes colors appear lighter, while low luminance makes them appear darker. Adjusting the luminance affects how bright or how dark a specific color appears, but changing the luminance can also alter the saturation. You can see this when we enhance the contrast of this image. By increasing the contrast, you can also indirectly add in more saturation. So let's have a look at red again, but this time with luminance. On the left-hand side, you have 100% red hue, but let's say we tone the value down to around 20%. Now it almost becomes a brown color. Again, I haven't changed the hue or saturation, just the luminance this time. So changing and altering the hue, saturation and luminance can come up with completely different results. And tweaking just two of these values, saturation and luminance, can come up with a whole spectrum of shades and tones, just starting from one raw hue. So how can we use hue, saturation and luminance in practice? Well, let's have a look at this photo, for example. At the moment, there is just too much saturation in this photo, but simply turning down the saturation and decreasing the values can completely change the dynamic of the photo, and it can turn a bad photo into a great one. Now, that's not saying saturated colors are all bad, but you have to use saturated colors in combination with other shades and tones to create a great image. You can even use bright saturated colors to draw the viewer's attention to certain parts of the photo. Take this photo as a great example. Using the desaturated tones of the water and the sky can really bring emphasis to the buildings on the left and right hand side. This is deliberate, drawing the viewer's eye to what's most important in the photo. Now, this can also be seen in films, movies and TV shows. Take Star Wars as a great example. Whenever there's a fight scene, the colours and hues of the surrounding background, and even sometimes the actors themselves, have been on purposely desaturated to draw the viewer's attention to the lightsaber. Now, this is obvious when you view it in contrast, scene by scene, and out of context. Now, the reason why understanding colour theory and the anatomy of colour is so important in photography is because it's one of the fundamental ways we change and alter colour in Lightroom, or any editing software for that matter. We edit and adjust the primary colours inside the calibration tool, as well as we can adjust the hue, saturation and luminance, that's the anatomy of colours, inside the colour mixer tool. And we'll take a look at the different tools inside Lightroom in part 2 of this video. Now, I also want to talk about two other factors, white balance and colour temperature, as both of them play a very important role about how we feel about colours in photography. Now, first up, let's talk about white balance. Now, white balance refers to the hue of the light source, measured in Kelvin. This indicates whether a light is very warm, so a reddish light, or very cool, a very bluish light. Now, the lower the Kelvin value, the warmer, more yellow the red the light is, where the higher the Kelvin value, the cooler, more bluer the light is. And I'll give you a few examples. Candlelight, for example, is between 1 to 2000 Kelvin, very warm with lots of orange and red, where tungsten light is more 2.5 to 3000 Kelvin, very warm with very yellowy orange light. Next, we have sunrise and sunset, aka golden hour. That's usually between 3 to 4000 Kelvin. And then we have daylight, which is more neutral white light. And that can have to be found between 5000 to 6500 Kelvin. Next, we have overcast daylight, which can be between 6500 to 7000 Kelvin. And if you're photographing the shade, well, that could be very cool with between 7000 to 10,000 Kelvin. So you can see how the temperature of the light can actually affect the overall atmosphere of your photo. Next, we've got color temperature. Now, color temperature refers to whether the colors are cooler or warmer, and all colors are found on the color temperature wheel. Warmer colors would be more on the reds, orange and yellow side, where cooler colours can be found more on the blues and purple sides, as you can see by this diagram. And adjusting the white balance as well as colour temperature of your image can have massive impacts on the way your photo looks and also how your photo feels. Which leads me to my next point, the psychology of colour. Now, colour temperature, as well as hue, saturation and luminance, can also affect your mood, and I'll give you a few examples. Take the movie Up. The movie starts with colours being very vibrant. There's lots of warms, orange tones, pinks, vibrant grass and bright colours. This signifies a happy and joyful moment in their lives. But later on, it turns to sadness, and the colours are completely changed, with very desaturated tones, lots of greys and lots of browns, and almost no bright colours to be seen. The colours can be used to signify and feel a certain emotion, and the lack of colours can also make the image look sterile and lacking of emotion. This is obvious when we view it out of context and side by side to each other, but when watching the movie, it can sometimes be missed, making the emotions feel even more natural. Colours are also highly associated with certain emotions. Now, depending on where you're from and your cultural background and even life experience, this may differ from person to person. But genuinely speaking, most colours can convey the same emotion. Now, the psychology of colour, I think, is a video on itself, so I won't dive too deep into what each colour means and how it can convey different emotions. But here is a simple diagram showing you what each colour means and how it can express certain moods and emotions in photography, and I'll give you a few examples. Red often symbolises passion, energy and danger, but can also signify luck in certain cultures, like China for example. Blue is commonly associated with calmness, trust and stability, but might also evoke sadness in certain photos. Green can also be associated with being natural and trusting, but can also represent money and prosperity. Cool and warm colours can also represent certain emotions as well. Warm colours, i.e. red, orange and yellow, are often associated with energy, excitement, warmth and attention-grabbing emotions, whereas cool colours, i.e. blue, green and purple, can typically evoke calmness, relaxation, trust and sometimes sadness or even detachment in certain photos. Now, these principles are not just photography and film specific. The psychology of colour is widely applied in marketing, branding and design to evoke a desired reaction. For instance, brands might use blue to convey trust and reliability. That's why a lot of banks use blue in their marketing, while red, for example, like the Red Cross, might use it to simulate urgency. Colours can also play a role in interior design to set mood, fashion to express personality, and even therapy to influence well-being in mental health. There is even scientific evidence to support a biological impact of colour and mood on behaviour, such as blue light improving alertness or green to reduce stress. Now, you can actually use this biological impact to your advantage. Take the colour red, for example. Red, as a hunter-gatherer mindset, was very important 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, because red was the colour of our food. Take strawberries or berries, for example. We used to rely on them for our survival. So as a human, being able to see red is very important. But obviously, we're no longer hunter and gatherers anymore, at least I'm not. I buy all my food from a supermarket. So we can use red as a very important colour, and it will make our photos stand out versus other colours on the colour spectrum. So we can almost hack this biological impact of our colour, and that is why the psychology of colour is so important. But the aesthetic of those colours is also super important as well, and not something to be taken lightly. And there's one more thing we really need to pay attention to as a photographer, and that is colour harmonies. Now, colour harmonies is the fact that some colours just look better together than others. It's essentially the relationship between how colours interact with each other and how they're represented together in one image. They might also be known as a colour scheme or a complementary colour set. So let's have a detailed look at the 6 most popular colour harmonies that we can find in photography. First up, a monochromatic colour harmony. A monochromatic colour harmony in photography refers to a use of a single colour or hue alongside its variations in tone, shade and saturation to create a visually cohesive and aesthetically pleasing image. This approach emphasises subtle contrasts to create a sense of unity, mood and sophistication within the photograph. Now, it's very common in nature photography, portrait photography, abstract photography and of course black and white photography. Now, tips for achieving a monochromatic colour harmony is making sure you're choosing the right colour. Align the colour with the mood and message that you want to convey, as well as making sure you've got the right amount of saturation. Too much saturation can overwhelm an image, especially if you're only using one colour. Now, to make it a little bit easier for you guys to follow along, what I've done is I've actually printed out and made a colour wheel. And what I've got is these little counters here, and what we'll do is I'll place them on the image so you can see which colour harmony or which photo falls into which colour harmony. I've got 3 examples for each one we're talking about. So the first image here I've got is a photo I took last year, and it was one of my favourite images of 2024, and it's a great image of the Northern Lights. Now, all of these colours fall, as you can see, fairly easy within the magenta colour harmony here. You can see here, or purple, basically all one hue. And the white and darks are just the lack or the amount of luminance in the photo. So this is a great example of a monochromatic colour harmony. Next photo is of a landscape photo. It's a photo I took in France, again in 2024, but this time we've only got blue. So we can do is move these little counters here, so they've only got blue in our colour harmony, represented in the dark shadows as well as the brightest parts of the sky. And my last example is of a grey seal. It's my wildlife photo, and all of them fall within the orange section of our colour harmony here. And you can see it's a great example of a monochromatic colour harmony. We've basically got no other colours. Although it might not seem like you've got a lot of orange in there, when you desaturate orange and increase the luminance, you've got that sand colour, and even the seal is of that colour. So this is a great example of a monochromatic colour harmony, and they're found everywhere in nature. Next up, we've got the analogous colour harmony. Now, an analogous colour harmony in photography involves the use of colours that are adjacent to each other on the colour wheel to create a visually pleasing and harmonious composition. This approach relies on the limited range of hues that are naturally blending together, resulting in a cohesive and often soothing aesthetic. Now, this can commonly be found in landscape photography, portrait photography, abstract photography, and also street photography. Tips for achieving a colour harmony is making sure you're choosing a dominant colour. Select one hue to take centre stage, then others as a supporting colour to avoid visual clutter. Also play with saturation and brightness. For instance, one colour might be very vibrant, while all the other colours might be quite muted. So let's take this photo as an example. It's a photo I've taken in Kurukura National Park. It's a great example of an analogous colour harmony. So for example, we've got green, but you've also got blue here as well. Very, very subtle, but definitely there you can see in the sky. And then we've got a little bit of teal as well in the water. So you can see you've either got blue, which is our main colour, or bluey teal, which is our main colour, and then we've got slight offshoots on the blue side and the green side. So it's not a true monochromatic colour harmony. The colour harmony's got a little bit more variation in colour, making it an analogous colour harmony. And then we've got our next image, which is another great example. We've got a lot of green this time, but you've also got a little bit of red and a little bit of orange found in the red deer. Now, it's not true red, it's more on the orange side. So you can see we've got this portion now of our colour harmony, which again is a great example of an analogous colour harmony, especially using warm tones. And then lastly, we've got another great landscape photo I took in St. Paul's Cathedral. And again, this one here is a little bit more on the blue side, but again, we've got some teal in there and we've also got some green as well. So again, all you need to do is to add a little bit more color variation to make a monochromatic color harmony into an analogous color harmony. And they're found everywhere in nature. Next we have is a complementary colour harmony, probably the most popular. Now, a complementary colour harmony in photography refers to the use of colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel to create a visually striking and dynamic composition. This approach relies on the inherent contrast between the complementary colours, which when used effectively can really draw attention to emphasise certain subjects and evoke strong emotions in the viewer. Now, common places you can find a complementary colour harmony is in portrait photography, landscape photography, street photography, as well as still life and product photography. Now, tips for achieving a complementary colour harmony is determine a dominant colour. Choose one colour as the primary focus and then complement it to avoid having an overwhelming image, as well as always rely on negative space. Incorporating negative space can really help manage the boldness of the complementary colour scheme, making it a lot more balanced than if you're having equal colours. So let's have a look at this image. Now, this is a great example of a complementary colour harmony. We've got very kind of blues here, as well as we've also got yellows. And I'll probably say that blue is more here. So you can see they're basically completely opposite on the colour wheel. Now, we've also got a little bit of orange, so I suppose we could move these little counters this way, but that is a great example of a complementary colour. Blue is the overwhelming colour, and then to complement that, to add a little bit of contrast, we've also got yellowy orange over here, which works really well. And this is another great example of a natural colour harmony. Again, it's of the Northern Lights, but this time in October. And this one here uses green as our main colour, and then we've got kind of purpley, reddy colour that you can see here, maybe closer to here, I suppose. But again, complementing each other, and then the negative space would be the space, which is black, really showing the visual striking between these two colours. And then lastly, we've got this image, which is probably my favourite image I've taken, I think ever. And it's a photo I've taken of Mesa Arch in Canyonlands National Park. And this one here, you've got red, then you've also got blue. This is a very common colour harmony, especially if you look in politics. Red and blue, again, Democrats versus Republicans, they're opposite each other. And again, the contrast between these colours can work really well in photography. Next up, we have a split complementary colour harmony. A split complementary colour harmony in photography is a variation of the complementary colour scheme, but instead of using two directly opposite colours on the colour wheel, this scheme uses a base colour and then two colours adjacent on its complement. This creates a visually dynamic yet less intense contrast than a traditional complementary colour harmony, making it a more versatile and easier to balance, a lot easier to find, especially in nature. Now, you'll find this everywhere, from portrait photography, landscape photography, street photography, and even still life and product photography. Now, tips for achieving a split complementary colour harmony is always find a dominant colour. One colour as the dominant scene, then the other two colours to accent, to aid as visual balance. And also, I'd experiment with saturation and tone. Use desaturated tones to add a little bit more sophistication to your colours, as well as play with proportions. Apply a 70-20-10 rule, for example. So maybe 70% as the base colour, then 20% as one of the split colours, and then 10% as the other split colour, maybe as the highlight or shadow tones. Now, you'll often find a split complementary colour harmony at sunrise or sunset, which is all three of my examples. So for example, let's take this image here. This one we've got blue, so we'll place our blue counter over here. Then as our complementary, we've got orange, which is found in the sunset, but we've also got red as well. So you can see, although it's not directly opposite like it would be on this little black counter, what we've done, let me move that, is we've split them into two. So we've almost got an analogous color harmony, but then we've got a complementary color to boot. Looks really, really nice, and a lot easier to create sometimes than just a simple, straightforward, complementary color harmony. Another example, again, of sunrise, although the last one was sunset. Again, a very similar, but this time we're going for a slightly darker blue and then a slightly brighter color. So we're going for more of a yellowy color in the sky, and then kind of fades more into that orangey red color. So this one's slightly skewed, but again, it's another great example of a split complementary color harmony. And then on my last image, which is one of the favorite images I've ever taken, this is Old Faithful at Yellowstone National Park. And this one here uses a lot darker blues. And again, we've got that kind of orangey yellow over here, so we'll place that. But then we've also got some green in there as well. So we'll place that about here, I would say. And again, it's a little bit easier because we can play around with one side of the color wheel versus the other. Again, blue is the dominant color, but then we've got a nice gradient with the warmer tones found on the other side. This is a great example of a warm versus cool complementary color harmony. My fifth color harmony is the triadic color harmony. Now this color harmony in photography involves using 3 colors that are evenly spaced around the color wheel. Now this is probably the most challenging color harmony to create, as colors are not usually found in a triadic pattern in nature. Now this approach uses a vibrant and dynamic composition, as 3 colors are chosen to offer balance, yet also adding a contrasting color palette. Now you'll often find this in street photography, product and still life photography, events photography, and also landscape photography. Tips for achieving a triadic color harmony would be to choose a dominant color. Assign one color as the primary focus, with 2 other colors acting as a supporting or accent color to avoid an overwhelming image, as well as experiment with saturation and proportions. Using all 3 colors at full saturation will feel way too intense, so muting 1 or 2 of those colors will create a more sophisticated look. As well as consider proportions, maybe apply a 60-30-10 rule. 60% of the composition uses one dominant color, while 30% can use the secondary color, and then 10% can use the accent color, maybe just for the highlights or shadows. Now this is a great example of a triadic color harmony. So for example, we've got green that you can find over here, but you've also got red in the photo, or reddy pink, I suppose you could say, of that boat. And then you've also got the blue over here. So you can see how equally distributed all 3 colors are, but they're all taking up a slightly different proportion of how much they take up on the photo. So blue takes up a lot more, then I would say green, then I would say red. So we're going for a slightly different balance, but it works really well for this photo. Now we've got another street photo, but this one was taken in London. Now this one here, we've obviously got the deep dark red of the bus, but then we've also got this kind of light blue that you can see coming through, especially in the shadows there. And then we've also got a little bit on the side view mirrors, we've got this yellowy green color coming through, but that's very, very subtle, maybe only 5% of the photo. So again, we've got red versus blue versus like a greeny yellow color. A really nice example, I think, of a street triadic color harmony. And then lastly, we've got a photo taken in Croatia. Now this one, we've obviously got blue that you can see appearing in the sky, but we've also got a little bit of green coming through, especially in the foliage, and then a tiny slither of red, nice deep dark red that you can see on the top of that church. Again, a really nice example of a triadic color harmony. And lastly, we have the quadratic color harmony. Now, a quadratic color harmony can also be known as a double complementary color scheme, involving 4 colors that create a rectangle or square on the color wheel. Now, this approach combines 2 complementary color pairs, creating a vibrant and diverse color palette while maintaining balance. A quadratic color harmony offers photographers significant creativity and flexibility to explore a whole range of color compositions. Now this is most notably found in portrait photography, sometimes found in landscape photography, very common in street photography, as well as still life and product photography. Tips for achieving this complementary color harmony is choose one dominant color. This will avoid the viewer being overwhelmed by the amount of colors seen on screen, as well as controlling the amount of saturation in all of your colors. Fully saturated colors can really make this color palette look overwhelming. So I would definitely have more muted tones. This will create a lot more of a sophisticated look, and it will avoid overcrowding in your photo. Now here's my first photo of a quadratic color harmony. Now this one here, we've actually got 2 color harmonies mixed into one, I think. You've got blue over here, or more of a darker blue found in the shadows, as well as you've also got yellow in the highlights you can see on the right-hand side. But you've also got the model, I suppose, or the person on the bike. He's got a red jacket, but he's also got a green bike, or it's a greeny bluey bike anyway. And as you can see, we're creating one color harmony and then another one, creating a quadratic or double complementary color harmony in just one photo. Next up, we've got this photo, and it was a photo I've taken in the rain. It's a reflection of this light structure in central London. Actually, it's right near King's Cross Station. And this one, you've got a range of lights coming through. So for example, you've obviously got black as the main color, and then you've got the lights. So for example, you've got this teal color coming through, which is complemented by red. And then you've got this kind of very light blue coming through versus that orange color as well. So again, two complementary color schemes, creating more of a rectangle in this example, but two complementary color schemes creating this beautiful double complementary color harmony. And then lastly, we've got this urban man-made feeling photo. It's a photo I've taken in Red Canyon. Really like this image. And again, we've got very light blue of the sky, and then that's complemented with the orangey red that you can see in the background. But then we've also got the sign. Now the sign is green, but it's also got this kind of red coming through as well, especially in the background. So this one here, you've got a nice balance between man-made and nature, as well as warm and cooler tone colours, creating a beautiful double complementary colour harmony. Now, understanding what colours go where and what colours are in your photo and which colour harmonies match with your style of photography can actually be quite difficult. Now, one thing I would recommend is making something like this, getting some little characters, like this little bits of wooden, I don't even know what these are, off of a board game I got, and then printing out this nice colour wheel helps you visualise what colours match, which colours work, which colours don't, how to create a complementary colour harmony. But actually there's a digital version which actually I find way easier, and it's called Adobe Colour. Now, Adobe Colour is a free website that allows you to experiment with colours, allows you to select colour palettes if you're an artist, but for photographers, it's also got a really helpful use, allowing you to work out what colour harmonies are within your photo. Now, if you want to find Adobe Colour, I've placed it in the link in the description, or you can just type in Adobe Colour and just go to the first link. Now, this is what you open up with. Now, this page is more for artists, but it does have some use as photographers. So, for example, if you go over to where it says Colour Harmony, you can select a variety of colour harmonies we talked about. So, for example, monochromatic, you can actually select one. So, this is your main tint, and you can actually move that around and see how the colours interact with each other, and it's incredibly helpful. Now, this is helpful more for artists working out palettes and things like that, but for photographers, what we want to do is go from colour wheel to extract theme, and this is where you can basically drag and drop your photo. So for example, let's take this photo that I recently used that showed a triadic colour theme. You can see, drag and drop, these are the colours that are found within my photo. But now if we go to the colour wheel, we can see these colours are represented here in the colour wheel, which is really helpful to see. So we can go back, you can see where the colours are found. Now, we can move them around if we want to, but if you go back to the colour wheel, we know exactly where they are. So for example, we know this is obviously white, then we've got reds, we've got the kind of, I suppose you could say that's more of a greeny yellow, and then we've got this teal colour, and we can see where they fall within the photo. And then you can even move them around and create nice gradients, for example. So I'd probably move that there. So we've got the yellows, reds, and blues there. But then you can upload, again, even more photos. So for example, I'm going to drag and drop, let's say this one, and we drag that in. Now, these are the photos that we've got. Now, this one here is actually picked out the green of the comet there. So when we go, it's not going to show a monochromatic. But if we actually remove that color, so if we select this one, make it more dark, then we go back to the color theme, you can see that it's a great example of a monochromatic color theme. All the colors are very close together, or basically the same hue. And we can do it again for one more photo. Let's say we want to upload this photo of Mise Arch. So we go back to extract theme, drag and drop that onto the website. These are the colors that it has selected. Now you can actually change them. So these are the bright colors. These are the more muted colors, deep colors, dark colors. But I usually choose colorful. It's a good example. Then go back to color wheel. You can see this is a very close to a complementary. So we've got red and then we've got blue there. And it even gives you the swatch number as well, which is incredibly helpful. And then you've got a few other tools as well, like for example, gradient. So you can see the gradient within the photo. And again, it gives you all of the HSL, the CMYK, the lab coordinates, which is really, really helpful. So if you haven't used Adobe Colour yet, highly recommend using it because it's a very helpful tool for photographers. So firstly, select what colors are in your image if you ever want to turn them into a color palette, but also to work out what color harmonies are in your photo. And that's it for part 1 of understanding colour theory as a photographer. And make sure to stick around for part 2, where we take what we've learnt today about the anatomy of colour and colour theory, and we apply it inside Lightroom with learning how to use the calibration tool, the colour mixer tool, the colour grading tool, as well as how we can use masks to get a better colour composition inside your photography. So if you are interested in really pushing your photography forward when it comes to colour, make sure to stay subscribed, because that video will be coming out next week. Thank you to all of my YouTube members that are currently supporting the channel. If you guys want to support the channel and get some awesome perks, including free Lightroom presets, make sure to go ahead to the link in the description. I've been James for Photo Fever, and I'll catch you guys next week for part 2.